managing a high growth team is a war zone in itself. And then quite literally, you find yourself in a war zone.
They were not the right fit for the organization at that place. They were fantastic, but not at where Preply was at that time.
How do you help those reps who are underperforming? Welcome to another episode of the Modern Sales Leader Podcast. We're here to share battle-tested tips from the trenches that you can go adopt and implement right away to see success in your business. Today's conversation is with Elitsa Zaimova. She's a wife, a mother, and a sales director over at Preply, where she's been leading teams for years. In today's conversation, we go deep on one-on-ones with reps and how to help reps through hard times, including, but not limited to, the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, where she actually led her team through a very high growth season for the business. Let's rock and roll. What's up, y'all? We have Elitsa Zaimova here to join us on the Modern Sales Leader Podcast. And Elitsa is a sales director over at Preply, and she is here to share all of her wisdom with us. So Elitsa, thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jack. Glad to be here.
100%. Now, fun fact about you, you are from
Bulgaria.
Bulgaria. And is that kind of what got you into Preply?
Well, actually, not exactly. Bulgaria is a very small country in Eastern Europe. I was born and raised there, but I moved to the U.S. I was going and spending my summers on Cape Cod. It's a place close to Boston area during my undergrad years, and I fell in love with the U.S. and I said, maybe I'll try my luck in this country.
Amazing.
And then moved to DC, Washington, DC, and that's where I found my first job in sales.
Wow.
Jack, you probably have heard of Corporate Executive Board, now Gartner.
Yep.
That's where I took on this journey to become a sales leader. And luckily for me, they had a fantastic sales training program that I had to go through. Sold the Challenger sales approach you probably are familiar with. I was trained on it, and then I helped marketing and sales leaders implement it in their organizations. So it's been quite the ride in sales.
Wow. So how did you feel as a Bulgarian girl starting her whole career in the middle of Washington, D.C. at this massive company that we now know as Gartner? What did that feel like for you?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I was definitely doubting myself. Can I do this? Is this for me? Will I be able to manage the stress, the risk? But it was exciting. I was learning so much, and I actually loved interacting with people. I didn't mind cold calling. It kind of was a challenge of, if you can make somebody talk to you and share their problems in a cold call, you probably can do a lot of other things too. So it taught you a skill for life, right? And that's the beauty of sales. It teaches you a skill for life. But it took me a little bit of time to get used to it. Luckily, I'm quite of an outgoing person, so it was not a big change.
Amazing. I think what I love about your story specifically is it's just proof that anyone can get into sales and do well. And so here you are coming across the pond from Eastern Europe into the US, and you got after it. You jumped in and started. And that's truly what I enjoy the most about being in this industry. Anyone can do it if you're willing to work hard.
Absolutely. Anyone can do it as long as you want to put the effort, right? And you build a plan of how you do that. And kind of those are the things that helped me, right? I want to work as hard as possible to get up on the ladder. And, I was looking at all the account executives closing business and being so excited. And I said, I wanted to be part of that. I want to get there as quick as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how long have you been at Preply then?
I've been with Preply for about 7 years. Actually, fun fact, Jack, is after moving to DC, I spent about 5 years in Washington, DC. And then with my husband, we decided to relocate to Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Because his job provided him with that opportunity. So we were young back then, and we said, why not? It's going to be at least a fun challenge, new country to explore. So we decided to move to Ukraine. And that's actually where I found Preply. It was a small startup back then, joined the team. And right now, Preply is about 900 people company, so quite big. And that's where I started the B2B division at Preply, which was a really fun ride.
Do you know what number employee you were?
I think I was about 35th or 36th employee, but just, we were predominantly a B2C organization. And back then, as anyone I've spoken in sales, I was thinking maybe I can switch career, maybe I can try something new. So I joined as a head of customer experience and created quite a few processes at Preply at that time, working on the supply department, working on the product department. But my heart was always in sales. And the
Yeah.
first even day I joined at Preply, I was thinking, we need to create a B2B division. There has to be a Preply business where we support organizations. It took me just a little bit longer to convince the CEO to go that route, and myself in back in sales. And I do not want to look for any other career.
Yeah.
It's an exciting career to be.
Yeah. 100%. So how big is the team you sit over now then? How many reps total are we talking?
Yeah. So Practically Business right now we have an outbound division. We have so SDRs, as AEs, and post sales team, plus a couple of product managers and other support roles. So we're about 100 people, and we have over 1,100 customers that we support. So
Wow.
it's been rapid growth. Again, the most fun experience I've ever had, the most
Yeah.
fun journey building the business from scratch. Very challenging, but
Okay.
really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, congrats to you and probably because not a lot of people get to tell the story of employee number 35, 7 years later, still at the same company, still growing. And that's just a testament to what y'all are doing over there. So very cool. Now, in those 7 years, this might be a difficult question to answer, maybe not. What's the wildest thing that's ever happened to you in sales, like over the last 7 years at Preply?
Yeah. Well, a lot of wild things have happened for the last 7 years, but Jack, personally and professional, one of the, I would say, the wildest and the craziest experience I've had while at Preply was my testament of leadership skills while the war in Ukraine happened.
Wow.
I'm sure you are familiar that in 2022, right, Russia attacked Ukraine. At that time, actually, my husband and I were evacuated from Ukraine a month
Wow.
right before the war happened. And on top of that, I was 6 months pregnant.
Oh
So
my
we
goodness.
were, we were a little bit living like a digital nomad, moving from Georgia, the country, to UAE, to Spain. And in the midst of that, Preply business was growing about 4x year over year.
Wow.
We were rapidly hiring. I was managing large sales team. And just think about how do I manage the growth and ensure we hit our revenue targets. How do I manage the team and their well-being given right what has happened? And on top of that, how do I manage my well-being? About at that time I was seven
Right.
months pregnant, so it
Goodness
was a
gracious.
challenging time, but thankfully, right, like focusing on what I can control, and
Mhm.
that's managing my team, ensuring their well-being, and ensuring my well-being is what helped me overcome it. Definitely was a big
Wow.
stretch for me as a leader.
Elitsa, I just need to do like a very deep bow to you of respect because any one of those things in isolation, right? I mean, my wife is pregnant right now. It's already a war
Oh,
zone for her with
congratulations.
already having another one. Thank you. That's a war zone in itself, right? Managing a high growth team is a war zone in itself. And then quite literally, you find yourself in a war zone. Like all three things at once, that will stretch you. That will stretch you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But again, it really teaches you that if you only focus on what you can control, right, you'll be a lot better off. And secondly, we're a lot stronger than we think. And when
Yeah, that's
once
what I
you're
was
stretched,
thinking.
you understand, right, like that we can handle a lot more. Luckily, also I had a fantastic team. It was just not me alone. They were super understanding. We went through this together, but I've definitely learned a thing or two on stress management.
Yeah. Do you feel like the team at Preply is like very bonded, like on a deep level because of that experience?
Absolutely,
Oh
absolutely. The
wow.
whole organization stood behind the team. The whole team, right, like cared about each other. So it really built a community of people that were not just there, right, to hit revenue targets, that we're there to support each other and to support our clients because
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
our clients and potential clients were going through the same. So it definitely
Yeah.
made us a lot stronger.
So it's funny. My first question was actually going to be about retention, and obviously, like that situation isn't funny. But the irony of it was, what's the number one strategy you use to retain top talent? And it sounds like it's like literally care for your people when they're going through one of the hardest things they'll ever go through in life. So yeah, how would you answer that question? Like, what is that number one strategy you use to retain top sales talent?
Yeah. I mean, Jack, you already answered it yourself, right? Like what has worked perfectly. We, by the way, have a very low churn of employees,
Yeah.
luckily for us. There are a couple of things that have worked for us. And even before you think about how do you retain top talent, for us, it's really important to understand, do we have the right talent in place? Because
Yeah.
sometimes, Jack, you can hire top salespeople and they're fantastic at sales.
Mm.
And they can hit their revenue targets, but are they the right fit for the organization in long term,
Yeah.
right? And are they the right culture fit? And that's something that we pay special attention to
Mm.
first. And second, right, is creating that environment where people can be their best, right? Where
Mhm.
I can perform my best. Sometimes selling can be a lone thing. You feel like you're alone. You have to bear the stress alone. But if you put a community behind it, it feels a lot less stressful and helps the team overcome challenges together.
Yeah, yeah, I think your answers are like perfect. The first one is hire right in the first place, and you're going to have high retention naturally. It kind of reminds me of something I learned in one of my businesses where we were bringing customers in pretty well, but then we would churn them pretty quickly after that. And we were so caught up on like, why aren't they saying? Why aren't they saying? Like, our retention sucks. But when we actually zoomed all the way out, they were terrible customers in the first place. Like they weren't even people. We just got desperate for some MRR and oh, we need revenue. And it's like that was not the right strategy. So I
Yeah,
love that. And
yeah.
then of course,
I,
community around that is huge.
Yeah, yeah. And Jack, what you mentioned, oftentimes people ask me, hey, if you start building an outbound function from scratch, right? What's the single most important thing to know you made it, right? Like what do
Mhm.
you look at? And a lot of times we talk about, adding new customers, we talk about sales metrics. But what we don't talk about is the single most important metric that tells you that you have a good product market fit is how are your customers staying and
Yeah.
using your platform, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, right, you have a good product market fit only if, right, like your customers that you're bringing are staying and seeing that in your product, not just staying, but
Yeah.
leveraging your solution.
That's another great point. That's why you have to have visibility into the actual usage metrics because we have also had customers that stayed a long time, but because we didn't have visibility, it turns out that it was just such a small item on their expense sheet that we just floated by. We didn't really know no one was using the platform. And it was like, oh, this is awkward. Like we should have caught this months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was so fortunate that when I started Pepper Business, I had an overview over the whole business, not
Mm,
just from acquiring new customers, but also retaining them and just understanding, do we create the best customer journey for
yeah.
our clients, not just when we sign the contract and we welcome them to Preply, but are we setting them up for success at Preply, right? And are we
Yeah.
acquiring the right customers after you have, at least 20, 30, you start understanding and who your ideal customer profile is and who should we go after that we could truly support.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then with regard to employee retention, I think
Mhm.
burnout could be one of the biggest churn factors for your own reps. So how do you spot burnout specifically? And then what do you actually do to fix that with your reps?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jack, when I look at an employee that is disengaged, right? An employee that seems a little stressed, an employee that is not necessarily hitting the target, that is not using their full potential. Those are usually first kind of causes of burnout. And what I
Mhm.
usually do is I like to take them out for lunch outside of work, get them out of their usual space,
Hmm.
and let's go and have an honest conversation. What I usually try to understand is what's happening in their life, right? What causes stress? Sometimes it can be, hey, I have this big deal that I don't know what to do and I feel alone and it's stressing me out. Sometimes it can be, I have so much on my plate, I don't know what to prioritize. Or if they're
Mhm.
newer, hey, I don't know where to start. I feel like I'm lost.
Mhm.
At times, they might have their own personal problems. We have to acknowledge that. And so
Mhm.
I really try to understand what causes that stress. Like, how can we,
Mm.
what is the reason for burnout? And secondly, what can we do? And first, I ask them,
Yeah.
what do you think is the solution? What do you think would, help you move out of the
Yeah.
situation? How can we build a plan together? And we commit to it together. And so, me as a manager, I'm their buddy. I'm there to help them, right,
Yeah.
overcome that situation and hold them accountable. And sometimes I would also pair them with a different salesperson because they like to learn from from their peers a
Yeah.
little better. That has worked well. But having that honest conversation, right? Hey, I'm here for you. Sales is stressful, and you're not alone.
Mhm.
We're all here for this. Really, really can help.
I think the fact that you're willing to pull them out of the professional context where, hey, this is a performance conversation, pull them away from that. And this is like, hey, what's going on? Like,
Exactly.
can we just eat
Yeah.
some food together? Now, if you're remote, how do you actually do that? Is that like a virtual lunch kind of?
Yeah, yeah, I usually do virtual after hours because during their work, it's like their mind is
Yeah.
still within the deal. So, hey, how about we get a glass of wine or, tea and let's have a conversation. It's person
Mhm.
to person, human to human. There's nothing about your performance you need to be worried about. I'm just here for you as a human being, just to understand what's happening in your world.
Yeah, I like that. One thing that I found helpful with SDRs is kind of talking through their why, their life why. Not just like, why do you want to do well here at this company, but like, why do you exist, right? Going to that level of like reminding you your purpose and then kind of reconfirming. So here's your life purpose. Like, you want to be a parent who gives your children a better future or childhood than you had. What if that's your life purpose right there? Cool. Do you still feel like this path here as a sales rep at our company, do you feel like this is a way to achieve that? Because if that
Absolutely.
disconnect is present, it
Absolutely.
doesn't matter how many lunches or how many conversations or how much support, like if they don't
Absolutely. You're
believe this
very
is the
right.
right vehicle, they're going to check
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. Again, it comes back to have we hired the right people with the right mentality, right, Jack? And
Mhm.
when I was building Preply, it's very interesting because I've learned the hard way where I've hired some absolutely fantastic people. Um, they
Mhm.
were very good salespeople and they were coming from top-notch sales organizations. But at
Mm.
Preply, we didn't have processes. We didn't have that organized way of selling at the beginning, right? So they might not have, they were not the right fit for the organization at that place. They were fantastic, but not at where Preply was at that time. So just
Yeah.
making sure that you have the people there that are able to thrive in the environment you offer to them is very important.
Cool. Okay. So that's when things aren't going well. Obviously, we have to have these not fun conversations with our team. What about when things are going well? What do you do, Elitsa, to celebrate and like to keep the morale, the momentum high? Do you have like spiffs you guys run? Do you do anything outside of just the average, like, hey, we'll give you a monetary bonus? Like, how do you celebrate, especially in a remote context?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have spiffs. We
Mhm.
also have some fun, I would say, fun trips together as a team, and we celebrate the achievements of each other. We typically celebrate on a weekly basis achievements. Even small wins should be celebrated, right? So we try to celebrate small or big wins by kind of highlighting the achievement that each person has done, by the contributions that they have
Yeah.
for the team. So that's, like we don't need to wait for those big wins to celebrate them. People should feel like they're on the right track throughout that journey. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we do at Preply. And another thing is if you have a top sales talent and you want to celebrate their achievements consistently, build a career growth plan for them. Like that is really
Mm,
important for them as well, right? Like say, hey,
that's
I
good.
know you guys consistently have overachieved your goal. Let's talk about your career growth. How do you see yourself, right? Like have that proactive conversation with them because top sales talent, they're very driven. They want to know what's next for them. And by starting the conversation, you show that you care about their development.
I think there's a way to gamify it too. Exactly what you're saying. It's like gamifying success, making it very clear, especially for SDRs.
Absolutely.
Again, I've led SDRs. I've not done full cycle, but I know that with SDRs, if you just make things very black and white, and progression is built into the day to day, it's kind of fun for them to be able to go, oh, cool. If I can get to this level of performance, I'll make this much money and I'm this much closer to the next step in my career. And so that gamification piece, I think, is huge. For you guys, you talked about celebrations
Absolutely.
like the frequent, even if it's not a huge win, you want to still celebrate
Absolutely,
frequently.
absolutely, absolutely.
Is
Even
that
as an
like,
SDR, you set up a meeting with a prospect you've been chasing for weeks.
yeah,
Let's celebrate that, right? Like
yeah,
let's talk about how did you do it? Let's talk about it. Let's celebrate you. And I think that's really important because we should celebrate the way, right? The
yeah.
process itself, not just the outcome.
Yeah, there's studies. I mean, we're both parents. The studies say like you shouldn't necessarily call your kids smart because that's like that's an outcome almost. You should celebrate the input of like, hey, you studied really hard or you worked really hard for this goal. You were consistent. And it sounds very similar where it's like, yeah, we want to celebrate the
Absolutely.
outcome. Duh. You
Yes,
closed a 200K deal. Let's go. But to your point, a good leader, a good manager will be rewarding the behavior it takes to close that
exactly.
200K deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay. Okay. Now, working one on one with reps, I'm curious to hear from you. How often do you do one on ones? Does it depend on the success of the rep, or is it all the same? Is it weekly?
Yes. And Jack, most recently, I actually have led sales team leads. So the one-to-ones with them are different. But when I used to lead reps, I would never skip a one-to-one. That's an important time with,
Mm,
the rep and myself. And what I found to work best, what I used to do is 1 week I would have one-to-one with a rep where it's all about them. That's their meeting.
mhm.
They can bring anything on the table, anything that is important for them to discuss, whether that's a personal thing, whether that's a deal, whether that's their growth and development. They decide the agenda. That's their time. And then next week, I'll do a more structured deal review meeting where we review the deals. We have a
Mm,
specific, obviously, like a structured framework of deal review plus forecasting. So they know that they have their space where they can bring anything to the table and that's not mixed
yeah.
with then reviews, right? It's separate. And third, I would have office hours, right? You don't wait for, all of this one-to-ones. If something happens, I always have office
Yeah.
hours where a rep can book time and just chat about everything. I can be their buddy. Let's, discuss how we approach a deal, or let's prepare for an important discovery, or anything that I want to talk about. So those are the three things
Okay.
I used to do as
I,
a manager.
I like kind of the A/B variation of like, hey, week one, it's personal. Week two, we're going to go deep on, performance and stuff like that. One thing I've always done is always started personal, like, hey, what's a personal update? What's a professional update? And kind of get their like ranking 1 to 5 there, how they're feeling.
Okay.
What's been hard for me is some of my reps would go really deep on the personal side and they're actually like way behind on quota, and I
Mhm.
feel really awkward in those conversations where it's like,
Exactly. That's why I
"Yo, if you don't."
separated it. Yes, because we
Yeah,
spend
yeah,
so much time, and if they start personal, you only have 30 to 45 minutes. It's very tough for me to bring it. But if they start personal, I'm there to listen, right? That's their
okay.
time. They could talk about, but then when we have to talk about business,
Mm,
right? It's they know that that's the expectation, right? And
that's
obviously,
really
if there's
good.
something going on, come to office hours. I'm there for you. But if we have
Yeah.
that meeting where you have to come prepared and you have to show me, right? Like we have to go through the pipeline, we have to go through the forecasting. That is
Yeah,
part
yeah, it's
of
it's
your
very
job.
black and white. Like, there's no,
Exactly.
because I think the way I would used to run one-on-ones was like, "Hey, like, we'll talk about personal. If we need to go deeper, we will, but hopefully we have time for this other stuff." That's so it sounds good, it feels good because every time you meet, you're doing personal, professional, but there's no hard line, so there's no kind of accountability there of, "Nope, this meeting is performance." Like, we can catch up personally later. This meeting, I really like that. At
Yep.
first, when you first said it, I was concerned. Like, well, I wouldn't want to spend 45 minutes just talking to a rep about life when they're going to be pipped in a week. And it's like, no, 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 that's not the point here. The point is that there's rigid expectation. So the next time they
Exactly.
show up, they know what
Exactly.
what the conversation is.
Exactly. And again, like when we have that pipeline review, I always start the first thing I was asking my one-on-ones, regardless what week we are, is what's one thing that happened last week that you're really proud of, like a small win that you want to celebrate,
Mhm.
and what's one thing that you've learned from? Because oftentimes there's so much that happens throughout the week, we don't have time to reflect, right? Or
Yeah,
even sometimes to celebrate those small things that put smile on our face. So
yeah.
in that meeting, they at least like, okay, I've actually achieved something really important, right? Or I've achieved something or I've learned from that big maybe
Mm,
meeting that I did not do so well. And this is what I'm taking away from it. And this is what I'm going to do better. So it kind of helps them reflect and it feels personal. And then we are like, okay, let's now move on to the pipeline review. But
yeah.
they know that that meeting is actually very much structured to big pipeline review, deal review, and
Yeah.
so on.
So I would imagine in all the years of leadership you have, I know in the few years I had, one of the really annoying things about one-on-ones is I didn't always connect with everyone. Like, I love people, so it wasn't really necessarily me. I don't think it was them. Sometimes you just don't connect with people.
Mhm.
Those one-on-ones would always frustrate me because I felt like I cared way more. I was trying to dig way deeper than the rep was. So what advice do you have for a rep in a one-on-one scenario who's just not they're not really sharing much, they're not opening up, you're just not connected?
Yeah. Well, for that rep, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's your manager. Don't look at a manager as somebody who's so distant, right? They're there as your coach, as your mentor, as somebody who is there to help you be better, right?
Mm,
So bring your concerns to them. I think, if that person does not make you feel comfortable, then that's a different conversation. But
mhm.
ultimately, your manager, their role is to make you feel comfortable, to understand how can I enable you to perform your best.
Yeah.
Um, so bring any concerns, in the right way, and share them and come up with solutions together. I think that's really, really important. And that's kind of how I felt that my role has always been. How can I take this person and enable with them to do their best at practice, to create the best environment and experience for them? And honestly,
Yeah.
Jack, as a manager, what I similarly to you, I first struggled because I love people too. I'm like, I want to connect with everybody. And what I did is I treated people as I wanted to be treated instead of like understanding and adjusting my management style
Mhm.
to each different person. And actually, that is one of the biggest advice I've given by one of my mentors is you should not be approaching this one-to-ones as you approach to everybody. You should tailor them to each different person based on how they
Yeah.
learn their best and how they share their best. So then it's the manager's job to make the SDR, the AE feel comfortable sharing in different ways because everybody is different and you should approach them in different ways as a manager.
Ha Have you ever, struggled when you talk to someone, like, you can tell they are weird about eye contact, like, they're kind of awkward about it, you know what I'm talking about?
I
N
yes, a little bit. I have.
not even in a one-on-one, just in general, like, human behavior,
Yes,
like, maybe
oh,
someone's
absolutely,
insecure.
absolutely, absolutely.
That stuff happens all the time for me, and I have to, like, remind myself, like, I'm not the problem, like, I know how to look people in the eye, like, this is not me, but it feels like it's you. I think it just parallels right to the one-on-ones where it's like, look, at the end of the day, you're showing up as a leader, you're trying to connect, you're trying to invest, you're trying to support them. If the rep isn't engaging with that, it's kind of on them, right? Like, I think it's just a misunderstanding they
Yes,
have, a misperception that, like, oh, my manager's my boss. They're here to like hit me with a stick rather than, oh, my manager's like a support system that's here to help me. Cause now that you talk through that, I go back in my mind, I'm like, well, I actually do think every rep I've had that disconnect with has been insecure that I've been there to like criticize them rather than support them. And it's just a
yes,
misunderstanding.
exactly, exactly.
Hmm. How do you help those reps who are underperforming and you have to have these not fun combos with? How do you help them turn things around quickly? Is there any strategy to that? Is there anything you do specifically? Or is it really just back on the reps to like show up and put in the work?
Great question, Jack. Well, the first thing I do as a manager is I actually, before I go to the conversation, I try to build, it's like sales, right? Like I try to build hypothesis. What is happening? What stops them? What prevents them from hitting their quota? And how I prepare is I look at the data, I look at the numbers, I look at their conversions, I look at their numbers, right? I look at the average deal size. I try to make
Mhm.
hypothesis and just to go prepare to that conversation. What is it happening, right? That stops them from hitting quota? Is it maybe something in the conversation? So listen to a couple of conversations, build hypotheses, and go and listen, right? You should have always your
Yeah.
hypothesis. And I usually go and again, like we're humans, right? I go and ask,
Mhm.
what do you think is happening, right? What do you think is happening? What stops you? Let them first reassess. And then let's look at the numbers together and understand together, right? Like, is it that there is a skill that needs to be developed? Because sometimes
Yeah.
reps, you don't know, they don't know what they don't know, right? And that's why you have to rely a little bit on the data, but also take their feedback in mind. Maybe sometimes they say, hey, I don't have the right product, or, I don't have enough pipeline. So
Yeah.
you have to look at the numbers, A, B, talk to them, get their feedback. And based
Yeah.
on those two factors, build a plan together. I don't think they should be left alone to figure it out. I think that's the
Yeah.
manager's job to serve as a support system. Like, hey, let's build a plan together, mutually agreed upon plan. I'm here to help you build a plan, and I'm here to stick with the plan, but it is up to you to put the work, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
and additionally, as I mentioned to you, I do like to kind of provide them with a buddy, like another maybe peer of theirs. If,
Mhm.
for example, on a I see a big drop in their average deal size, and that's a big issue. That's what prevented them from hitting goal. But somebody's
Yeah.
really excelling at that. Let's pair them together. Let them learn from each other, right? and give them the opportunity to, right, to seek to improve, but be there with them the first time. And if you see that that person is really not engaged, they're not interested, then then that's a different story.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I manage the team. I want to give them the opportunity to get back on track, because Jack, honestly, even us as A's, I mean, I've been an A, I've been an individual contributor. You have highs and lows. You have good
You
quarters
do.
and you have bad quarters, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of sales. You just have to be, you just have to go with the ride, and you have to be prepared to
Yeah.
have a better quarter. Learn from it and start back from scratch, and you're going to do better, right? But we've all had those quarters.
I feel like every sales leader or individual contributor listening is just nodding their head right now, like, yep, because I've seen that even in my career where I've had a super high performing rep at my company. They go to a different company, and then I find out like 3, 4 months later, they're not doing well. And it's just like, that's sales. It sometimes is, I won't say out of your control entirely, because I believe you can always influence stuff. But there is just this variability to sales that's like the chance part or the luck part, right? And it's just a roll of a dice.
Absolutely, absolutely agree with you.
But what you need is a consistent leader who's going to be there for you, making sure that you're not forgetting or missing anything in your funnel or your process or whatever it might be. So it sounds like you show up to one-on-ones with the answer. And then, like, do you prepare before each one-on-one for each rep, or do you guys look at the data together for the first time live on the one-on-one? What do you actually do?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it depends. Sometimes if there's a really big issue, I like to look at it in advance. I don't like to I look at it in advance just to be prepared. I don't like,
Mm,
sometimes I'll make hypotheses, but I would like to make those hypotheses together with the A.
mm,
And sometimes we look at it together and say, let's review the data. Let's see what's happening. What do you think is happening? I don't like to influence anybody's mind and go first. I think it's really important for the rep to look at that data on their own. Even sometimes I would share it with them before and say, hey, this is the data that I have identified. Reflect on it and let's come together and discuss it, right? Because when you look at the data, you need time to reflect on it. So it's really
yeah,
important for them to be prepared, but also for me to be prepared and go on it and
yeah.
discuss it together.
But that takes so much time. And I'm saying as like my lazy manager self, I'm like, I know the answer. I know exactly what you need to do. To your point though, that doesn't build an independent, strong sales rep. That just builds like a robot. And so I
Yeah,
even think about parenting, my 18-month-old. It's like I can just go do the thing for him and I can pick up his passy when he drops it, or I can like tell him or reach his body down to grab it himself.
yeah,
It takes so much quicker for me just to
yeah,
pick it up and put it in his mouth, but
yeah.
I'm not actually teaching him.
Yeah, and Jack, it's the saying, teach a man to fish, so then they will never be hungry again, right? And
Yeah.
that's what our job is as managers. My job as a manager is not to win that deal for that AE, right?
Mm,
My job is to be there for them and to coach them so they can win all the deals for themselves, because that's the fun for
yeah.
them too. No one wants to have that micromanagement, and AEs join companies so they want to learn and do it themselves. And I think that's
Yeah.
important for me as a manager, is to understand how can I enable you to do that right on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes patience to develop that in reps, but once you actually develop that I guess skill set or that kind of rep who can think for themselves, you actually save yourself a lot of time on the back end. Like 6 months down the road, you're not
Absolutely.
micromanaging this rep.
Absolutely. And Jack, one of the things, right? Like I've been a manager for almost 10 years. And one of the most rewarding things for me as a sales manager is hiring somebody who is fairly junior, even as they are, right? Preply,
Mm,
we actually, the first SDR at Preply, fairly junior, and seeing them grow to be one of the top account executive closing the most business. There's nothing more
mhm.
rewarding for me as a leader. Of course, like hitting sales quotas and achieving the crazy goals that we have is very important. But that personal kind of excitement of seeing somebody who started fairly junior and seeing them how they grow within the organization is one of the things that keeps me excited to come back to work and be a
Yeah.
sales leader. And I really love that. And for all, SDR seek for development, because it's going to be exciting for you, but it's going to be exciting just to see that career progression, see somebody who started
Yeah.
bringing for making the first call to like closing six-figure digit, and you're like, wow, I give
It's
them the
so
opportunity,
cool.
right? It's amazing. It's really cool on a personal level, and I love it, and that's why I come back to it every day. And I said, I want to see more of
Yeah.
that, and it's on me to help this team as well, not just with
Yeah.
their own.
My friend Mike Maluski, another sales leader, he gave me a beautiful picture of the whole teach a man to fish thing. He said, look, when a new rep comes in, I give them the fishing rod they need to use. They go use that rod exactly the way I say to use it for like a couple weeks. But then over that period, I'm starting to explain to them why the rod is the way it is, why we use this material, why it's this length. And you're teaching them, like, here's why this is the best practice. And then once they're in that place of understanding, now you say, "Hey, now you go build your own fishing rod." And odds are for
Exactly.
as they start, they're not gonna build a better rod, but they do build better parts to the rod. And then 9 months down
Absolutely.
the road, they do have a better fishing rod, and now they're multiplying that across the team. And so that frame of progression has really helped me think about developing reps.
Absolutely. And it's theirs. It's their ownership. So they feel more bought into this. And that comes back to your question, Jacqueline. How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep the
Mm,
sales team motivated? How do you keep them staying here? Give them ownership, right? They're not just
mhm.
here. Sellers, you tell them what to do, and they're like robots. Let them build something. Let them use it. Let them a little bit, maybe fail sometimes. It's okay, but they'll learn out
Yeah.
of it. They'll make it their own. They'll perfect it. And I think that's what keeps somebody to stay in the company. Say, actually, I am an owner. Like I'm an owner entrepreneur. I create my own strategy. I create my pipeline, and I have the resources to kind of tailor what works best for me to hit my goal. And I think that's powerful if you're an account executive.
Yeah. Well, if you're a rep out there and you love what Elitsa is saying and you're like, I want a manager like that, you should probably go hit her up and see if you can work at Preply because she
Absolutely.
has literally led her team through war and came out stronger for it. So, Elitsa, your wisdom has just been absolutely incredible today. I really want to just say thank you for sharing with us. In that vein of wisdom, do you have any like favorite quote, favorite motto, favorite saying?
Uh, I don't have per se a favorite motto, but I do live by a specific concept, and I want to share it with you, Jack. I think you'll probably already guess it, but every morning when I wake up, I think about the following. I have an option right now to wake up, get out of this bed, and carry this big bag of rocks on my shoulder all day called stress. Or
Mm,
I have the opportunity to say, I'm going to have the best day ever because I'm going to only focus on what I can control, and I'm going to make it the best out there possible. And as an AE, right, you can't control what a specific prospect would say to your proposal or
mhm.
how they would react to a negotiating call. But you have control over preparing for that and have all the resources now in the world with AI to do so, uh, and go there as much as possible prepared. And, that's all you can do. If you only focus on what you can control, and decide that by yourself you're going to have the best day ever every day, that's going to make you a better person. It's going to make you a better seller, and
Wow.
probably better mother, kid. So that's what I try to do every day. Try to have
Yeah.
the best day ever.
A wife, a mom, a sales leader. You definitely have a lot going on every day, but you're handling it magnificently. So, Alita, it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much for hanging out with
Same here,
us.
Jack.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Modern Sales Leader Podcast. If you found that helpful, go ahead and drop a like, drop a rating, drop a comment if you disagree with anything we talked through. But I thought that her one on one strategies were extremely valuable, especially when it comes to separating them into a personal one on one and a performance one on one. Because I've had many times in one on ones where I've gone way too deep on a personal rabbit hole with a rep, and we never got to talk about their performance. And because of that, they started slipping behind. So ultimately, as leaders, it's up to us to make sure we're providing the proper boundaries and formats for these conversations to ensure high performance from our reps while keeping them happy so they stay, just as Elitsa talked through. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.